Progress.
Shouldn't be a long meeting because it is a meeting that is like a predecessor to the evening one, where we will go into detail in terms of now discussing the shortlisted board applications. So now we must be able to get an insight on the process, on how it went, and get clarity on the process itself, which has been undertaken by our researcher. And then the actual discussion will happen later. So we will also be checking that in this particular meeting, that what was agreed upon by the committee in terms of the criteria that would have been used for shortlisting has been adhered to. Even though I was not there yet when this was agreed upon, but I have heard that there were certain aspects that you had agreed upon, such as the number of boards that an applicant would have been part of, such as the qualifications, and yeah, those are just some of the criteria that the committee had agreed upon. So that is what we're here to look at now, that in terms of its application and in terms of the shortlisting, are we clear on how that was done? And if it was done well, then later on we'll get into the actual discussions. With that, I welcome everyone into the meeting. Can you please get any apologies, Mr. Koze, if there are any?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we did receive, Chair, Mr. Mbata, who's unable to attend due to other commitments, as well as the Deputy Minister of Electricity and Energy, Mayor Graham Mare, who's unable to attend, Chair, due to other commitments. Those are the apologies received, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I see Mr. Milam's hand is raised, Chair.
Thanks, yes. Mr. Millam, you can come in.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to raise a query, and that is, you said that we will be discussing the shortlisting this evening, but in terms of our agenda, the discussion and deliberations on the NNR shortlisting is for the morning meeting, and this evening's meeting is about ESCOM APP and departmental APP. So I'd just like clarity that this morning's meeting we actually are going to discuss. It's not just a briefing session, because there is no other time that's set aside for discussion of the NNR shortlisting.
Thank you. It actually is scheduled. If you look at our program, later on, at 5 o'clock, we will start with getting the briefing by the Department of Electricity and Energy. And then after that, the item is discussing the process, or yes, discussing the applications, the board applications. I think in the program that has been shared on our emails and even in our group, it does state that, and that is what is in our program as a committee. I don't know if that explains it. That is why even the period of this meeting is short, because it will just not be enough for us to be able to, like, we're trying to give ourselves enough time to start now, just so that we get the clarities and everything, so that later on when we get into it, we're now clear and we've had time to also just digest the information we've been given. But we will get the presentation of the applications itself now in the morning. And I think it gives us time so that we can go over it. I think we did receive it yesterday as well. So now we get the clarity from the researcher on how they've come to the shortlisting that is there. Then later on, we get into discussing each application now. We will then go to the adoption of the agenda. Can you please get hands adopting the agenda? Honorable Hassan.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I'm happy to move for the adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nkosi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I'm just happy also to second the adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will go on to Ms. El Bramo to give us the update on the shortlisting.
Lee, I gave you co-hosting rights, eh?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just gonna share. Okay, morning members, morning everybody. So I'm just gonna take the members through the shortlisting. So this is the shortlisting for the community. Came up to 5 that was eligible. So as you can see, the reasons why they didn't qualify is given. So most of it is because they overprescribed on the boards, and then also there was no documentation, or the documentation was not certified. There was only 2 that with the experience wasn't, there was no experience basically, and also where they didn't meet the required qualification. There was only 2 of that. So then it came up to 5. So 5 meet the criteria and 12 didn't meet the criteria. Okay, and then it was the one that was working for Nexa that automatically disqualified according to the law. Then with regards to the labor representation, so yeah, I just need to mention that when it came to the nomination form, I saw there was a discrepancy between the community rep and the labor rep, because in the labor, a lot of them didn't have the nomination form. So I actually had to go back and look at the advert, and in the advert for the labor representative, there is no mention of a nomination form. It just says you need to be nominated and you must accept the nomination. It said nothing about prescribed nomination form. So none of them fell out because of the nomination form. That was the only difference between the community and the labor. But none of them fell out because of that. So mostly, yeah, again, the only reasons why they fell out was because of the number of boards was over the maximum number of 3, and there was either no documentation, there was qualifications but no ID, or qualifications but there was no certification. So any of those reasons. So most of you'll see is under the red, where there's no qualifications or there's no certifications. Most of them is because there's no certifications. So that's the reasons why they fell out. And then this one number 31 here didn't have the relevant qualifications as well. It wasn't at the diploma level. But those are the main reasons for them to fall out, if you've gone through it. And then you would see that the ones that meet the criteria are 57, and those that don't meet the criteria are 46. Yeah, that's just the long and short of it. If there's any candidate that you think needs to be discussed, sorry, or looked at further, we can do that. But that's what, based on the criteria, what has come out. Yeah, so there's still, as I said, for the labor rep, there's still 57 applicable candidates. So I think if the members want to bring that down, additional criteria will have to be put on the 57 that we have at the moment. Okay, that's my story, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think we also take, or rather, we note your proposal that now that Labour still has so many applications to be considered, and the fact that there has to be a way that it has to be brought down. I think those are part of the things that maybe we can discuss now. That with the process itself, that are we happy with what you have presented, and have you stick to the criteria as per the explanations that I hear in your presentation? So we'll take clarity-seeking questions based on your presentation. Can I please have hands? Okay, you can come in. Okay, so you can. We are going to take Honorable Trink, Honorable Ngosi, Honorable Milahem. Let me take questions. You can come in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, firstly, I think just a clarity-seeking question. Hopefully, all of the applicants were given the guidelines, because you may have a very good applicant, candidate for the position, who has been disqualified purely because an ID document hasn't been certified. So hopefully, there was that standardization where all of the applicants were given the specific criteria that they needed to meet. So I think that's just my first question. So and was certification also of documents one of the criteria that they needed to meet. And I'm assuming that that's the case, but it's sad to see that so many have been declined or not accepted, and because they didn't meet one of the criteria, which is a certified ID document. But be that as it may, also, Chair, I think so. Just the answer to that question. But then, secondly, I also agree that it would need to be whittled down. I think having what 40 to 50 or so individuals to interview is going to be a bit of an arduous task. And one of the ways in which that I can actually see of whittling it down is now looking at two possible criteria, which is experience and the other qualifications. Excuse me. So a possible standard, a higher bar would need to be then placed on two criteria. There may be others, but two that come to mind: experience and qualifications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ngosi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Thank you a lot to the staff, the researcher, and everyone who worked on this shortlisting. We welcome their report. Honorable Chair, I'm just looking at the labor representatives. I think, yes, you are correct in saying the number of the candidates that meet the requirement is too high. I think 57 is too high. We need to find a way maybe to take it down. I think one of the things maybe we can look at, Honorable Chair, is that in terms of the board, especially on the state-owned entities, we need to also, it should reflect the demographics of South Africa. I think we need to look at that as well, and we need to maybe check as well if the issue of qualifications, we look at that as well, maybe to make the number to go down. And also maybe check if there is women represented, and as well as the youth. We need to look at that as well, Chair. I think it's one of the ways maybe that can help us to get the number down. Because that will not be just something that we do out of nowhere. It should, the state-owned entities should be, it's constitutional that it should have a statutory requirement which will also help them previously disadvantaged. I think we need to look at that as well. That will help us to get the number down. But in terms of, I'm not sure if the presentation down the community, I'm looking at the report now, community representatives. I think those who meet the criteria, which are 5, we can submit them as they are, Chair. But maybe it's also on discussion as well. But I think the 5 that meet requirements, we can submit them. Those maybe are my views, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Millihan.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me start with the community reps. Candidate number 15, Ms. Mahlangu. I note that she did not submit a nomination form, but used the letter. Now, on that particular one, I understand from what Lee was telling us that a nomination form was, in fact, a requirement. If that's the case, then Ms. Mahlangu can't be put forward as a candidate because she did not meet the criteria that were set out in the advert. So I would argue that name needs to be withdrawn. I don't have a problem with any of the others on the community reps, but then on the labor reps, in particular, first of all, I want to disagree with Honorable Nkosi that I don't think. First of all, this is not a state-owned entity. It's a regulatory authority. It's a regulator. It's not an entity as such. And so we shouldn't be looking at it as though it has a profit-making criteria or any kind of operational role. It has a regulatory role. That said, I also think that at this stage, we should not be trying to apply quotas or demographic criteria. I think that would be wrong. I think you need to look at the composition of the NNR board as a whole and say, what does that look like before we try and shoehorn people in during the selection process. But I do agree that we need to whittle down the number of labor reps. And I think the starting point that needs to be done is that we need to strictly apply the criteria that we set out, and that was that there needs to be relevant experience that is applicable in the field that we're talking about. Now, we're talking about nuclear regulation and we're talking about nuclear safety in particular. That's the mandate of the National Nuclear Regulator. So if we go through them, for example, candidate number 7 has no board of experience, but 5 years experience in research, monitoring, and evaluation. Well, I don't know how relevant that is to a regulatory authority, which is primarily focused on nuclear safety. Similarly, with candidate number 21 and 22, 5 years experience in mine planning. Well, mine planning, again, is not something that is particularly relevant in nuclear regulation and nuclear safety, in my opinion. 5 years as a company secretary, maybe, but again, this is a regulatory authority. So I'm just trying to apply the criteria that we set initially quite strictly so that we whittle down the numbers. Candidate number 33, 2 years board experience, needs a minimum of 5 years equivalent experience, has 2 years, but experience in supply chain management. On the whole, yes, it does have board experience, so yes, that one should go ahead. Candidate number 40, 5 years experience in human resource management. I guess that could be argued that is relevant in an entity of this nature, but it's marginal in my opinion. Candidate 47, I would not put forward. No experience at board level, but experience in quantity surveying. I don't think that's particularly relevant from a nuclear safety perspective. Candidate number 53 has experience in the metallurgical industry. Yeah, I don't think that is particularly relevant from a nuclear safety perspective. Similarly, with candidate 58 and 59, Candidate number 67 has no experience, but has technology business development experience. I don't know the relevance of that. Candidate number 69, construction management. Candidate number 71, it says he has board experience, but it doesn't say what, and then it says experience in the mining industry. So that one I would suggest that we need to interrogate a little bit further. Candidate number 74, no board experience, but 5 years experience in project management. They're not being asked to manage projects here. They're being asked to regulate nuclear safety. So again, I don't think that that's particularly relevant. And I'm not trying to discriminate against people. I'm just trying to be very, very strict in how we apply our criteria to whittle down the number that we consider to a manageable number. Number 76, Advocate Seboko, has 5 years as a practicing advocate, and I think that probably would be relevant in a board environment, in a regulatory environment. However, candidate number 79, it looks like this person is a TV producer, and yeah, again, is that particularly relevant in a regulatory environment? Candidate number 89, similar problem. Candidate number 93, I would allow to go through based on the experience in engineering. Then candidate 101 and 102, candidate 101 does have board experience, so that one I would allow to go through. Candidate 102, Advocate Mbali, says over 5 years experience in auditing. I'm not 100% sure where, I suppose they do forensically consider the operational performance and the like of nuclear entities. So maybe, but that one again, it's questionable in my head. But that would be how I would whittle it down a little bit further, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mulaham. Honorable Hassan, which I believe is the last hand.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I do hope I'm audible. Let me start by appreciating all of the extremely difficult, hard work that Lee and the team have had to undergo to really come up with this list, and we really do appreciate it. I know that the recess period would have been filled with, the nitty-gritty of fine-tooth combing this whole process, so it really is appreciated, and I thought it's important just to say that because it is quite a process. I want to start generally by saying that we've gotten quite a good pool generally of those who have applied. And it would be good later on, I don't want to get into the substance of the discussion because I know we'll have that discussion later, but it's actually important for us to look at that selection criteria. And so we say relevant experience, but we don't exclude it. We don't say only nuclear experience. If you look at that selection criteria, we talk about legal, we talk about HR, we talk about a number of different categories. You'll remember we even had a discussion about it as this PC. So I don't want us to rule out candidates entirely on that. But the other thing I wanted to remind ourselves is the two types of vacancies that we are trying to fulfill in this process. And that is specifically for a community representative as well as for a labor representative. And one of those discussions we had was to not make it so strictly onerous in terms of having a master's, in terms of having an honors degree, et cetera, because of the type of board vacancy we're trying to fill. Members will recall that we're going to have another round of vacancies in which I think we can be a lot more strict in terms of NQF level of qualifications, et cetera, but I think it's important to not raise that bar too high and knock out a whole lot of candidates who are actually A, community reps, and B, actually labor representatives. So I thought I must mention that. The other important point I want to put across is that now that we've gotten the shortlist, remember everybody that, if I'm understanding Lee's table correctly, everybody who's on that table in green meets the minimum requirements. right? So everybody there is technically competent and capable, in theory, to be on the board, in theory. Now we must then say, how do we get that 57 down to a reasonable amount? Because we can't interview 57 people. That's not possible. Now that we've said everybody is capable and everybody is available in that sense, now we should look, in fact, at the demographics. Now we should look at previously disadvantaged. Now we should look at women, maybe people under the age of 40, for example. And that's not the only criterion. I think it's so important to overemphasize this. Everybody in that green list technically would qualify to be on the board. Of course, subject to the interview, of course, subject to all the processes we are now going to put them through. And we must understand our history. We must also understand the fact that the nuclear industry is one that has been historically closed off, particularly to the black masses of our people. And there are quite a few candidates on that list who are black, who are youth, who are women, for example, who should be considered in that way. So it's not the initial criterion. That's very important to say. The initial criterion has been qualifications. Do they meet the minimum requirements? Are they actually able to compete for a board application, etc.? So I think perhaps, Chair, I want to suggest before we meet tonight, perhaps what Lee can do, just for our information, is take that list of the people who do qualify and tell us which ones are women, which ones are black, including African, Indian, colored, which ones are perhaps under the age of 40. I wanted to say 35, but I know in the nuclear industry, it's very, very hard for young people to compete. But I think there's value in just knowing who's there. Then when we put together our list, remember, this is not the final list. This is just for us to interview. We can interview a wide array of people. And I think there's a real value to that. I think we can continue having the conversation based very specifically on the interviews and how they perform. But I would be amiss for us to say we must then interview. What if we end up interviewing 30 men? You know, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable in a country where the majority of the population are women, firstly, but it's also not acceptable in a space where we want to empower women. So I thought it's just important to make those few baseload points. Perhaps Lee can just add that in and then we can have a discussion. Importantly, we're not looking at that as the first point of criterion. It's actually a last point of criterion because everyone there qualifies. And the final point really, Chair, is to say now that we've gotten these lists, we've got the day, let's go through them in some level of detail. Let's go through our selection criteria again. Let's apply it through so that by the time we get through tonight, we can say, I mean, we could even decide that the 5 community reps are fine. We might even want to submit 5 entirely, right? Because of the 20, maybe we say 5 community rep, 15 in total. It can be labor because we need to submit 20 by the end of the interview process. But that's a decision our portfolio committee must make. I think we would want to interview a number of people in that sense. But I think, Chair, that's just a high level of what I was thinking. I think we've gotten some seriously good progress. And I think we can move the marker later on tonight when we reconvene. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take Honorable Babsi because he had not gotten a chance to speak. I do want us to get a response from Ms. Lee, and then we will get a direction on how we proceed in terms of concluding on how we finally reduce the number. But I don't want us to take too many hands before we can also allow a response because it's going to pile up and we end up with too many questions. But okay, let me hear you, Honorable Batsi and Honorable Millingham. Let me hear you in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to just ask a question of clarity. I'm referring to the what was mentioned by Honorable Hassan. In terms of a person's gender, it is obviously relatively simple to establish the gender of an applicant. But what I don't understand is how one would establish whether a person is black, colored, Indian, whatever, white. That's not clear to me. And I don't see how the researcher would be able to make that determination. So, question of clarity, how would that be done?
Thank you. Honorable Milan.
Thank you, Chair. I also have a question of clarity, and that is, and I stand to be corrected here, but I understand that we are going through a first round screening process right now, and then the list that we now shortlist is not our interview list as much as it is the list that we publish for public comment. Can I just get clarity that is in fact the case? That we're going to put these out on a website for public comment, and then we will shortlist from there for interviewing at a later stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Bramo, you can come through for the responses.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the first question, with regards to the certifications, in the ads they do ask for certified documents. So, and it's in our criteria as well. We specifically stated it had to be certified. So if you go to our criteria, it said certified copy of ID document and qualifications. So I was going according to that. But in the ads, they do ask for certified documents. And then with regards to, okay, the suggestion was we could look at the relevant experience. That's fine, it's up to the committee. And then with regards to demographics, Mr. Bhakti, actually in their CVs, if you look at it, they do state their ethnicity, let's say. They do state, most of them do state it in their documents. So it's not subjective. They actually state it in their CVs. Thanks. I think Ms. Dagan can answer Mr. Mallam with regards to the process of the interviews. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've had a good meeting. It has served the purpose of exactly what we wanted to achieve with this particular morning meeting, so that we can just get a feel of whether or not we are satisfied with the application of the criteria that the committee would have agreed on. And I do think that we should give ourselves time so that in the evening we then make the final decision on what we are agreeing on in terms of the how do we further lessen the number of our applicants. And then I know that there's that question about whether or not this is, like when we are done, this is what will now be published. I don't know if the committee secretary can assist us in responding to that particular question, but we will make the decision together later on. What is it that we are agreeing on how to go further?
I see Ms. Gangens, the parliamentary legal advisor, she raised her hand. Maybe if she can go before me.
Okay. I was just still finishing up. I'm coming to the end. So I was saying that, and then we'll get into further, then going into discussing each and every name as we had advised earlier. So I did see the hand that went up. It was, I don't know, the name is not. Yeah, you can come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair. Good morning to all on the platform.
Sorry, just can you please just indicate your name again so that I call it better next time. I do want to address you by your name. It's just the way that it's written here. It's giving me a bit of a problem.
Sorry, Chairperson.
You are noted, Honorable Chamberlain.
My name is Thiloshni Gangan. I'm the parliamentary legal advisor. Thiloshni is a bit of a mouthful. I accept that. You are, most people call me Gangan by my surname, so if that's easier to pronounce. Chairperson, I raised my hand just to answer Honorable Milam's question about what the purpose of the whittling down is for, and it really is for publishing on the website for comment. So that's where we are. We need to whittle it down for publication on the website for public comments. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Shamile.
Chair, thank you so much, and honorable members, good morning. Chair, I just want to find out, because we already have with us here a list of the 17 shortlists. And I see now we are still discussing the entire list of, I think, 120 of those people that were actually given to us. So are we going back to the original list and then trying to find people, or are we agreeing with the current existing shortlist? That's really the most important part I wanted to understand on that, because the shortlist was the last meeting's agreement that we don't all have to sit in through every candidate selection on a shortlist process in terms of who potentially qualifies to be on the shortlist for an interview purpose. So at this stage, we already at the point where we can agree that on the 17 that has already been highlighted, those are the people that we should agree on the qualifying criteria to say all of them, if they do meet the criteria, we are then taking them to the next stage of the interviewing process. So that is my understanding, but I see we are not at that level. There's been a slight change here and there. The other aspect of it is, there's this requirement that everyone who has to participate, particularly from a community point of view, has to come from a nuclear regulatory point of view. I think we have to, at some point, agree with it, or maybe adjust it a bit, because you can't expect people at the community level who have been activists, who have been labor representatives, as well as ordinary citizens who come from a walk of life, to be an experienced nuclear, either engineer, scientist, or somebody who's worked in the nuclear environment. Even the people who worked at a labor union level within a nuclear environment are not necessarily au fait with all the issues around, for instance, regulators. So in this case, our qualifying criteria should be the guiding principle to say if they tick the boxes that we have put out, qualification, etc., representation, form also. These people should be allowed in a way to participate. But if we're going to make it stringent, especially where there is no requirement for scientific nuclear basis, it is to do with regulatory support at the community level, issues relating to employment, equity, community engagement, community stakeholding, and issues of environmental, issues of skills, issues of aspect of, whether it's, to do with broad-based, representation, affirmative action, equity in terms of women, etc. So those are the criteria that we should be focusing on because of the requirement of the environment. So, as I said to you, I think we're going back because we are now opening up the full list of what has already been gone through and combed through. And the 17 shortlist doesn't seem to be applying. But, this is a committee where we can discuss and come to an agreement to say, okay, what is the approach to this whole thing? Unfortunately, you, Chair, are thrown into this because you're coming in at the tail end almost of the process. So, we can't hold you on this one. But the last agreement was that we should have about 35 or so, even less. I see the list has come to 17, and that 17 is currently the recommended process of saying, let's put this process through an interview process. And then out of that, then we can then select the few that we feel are most suitable to be actually finalized by the minister in this sense. So yeah, I'm not so sure if this is still the agreement or there's been changes on that one. But the criteria.
Mr. Njabileng, we lost you.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. I said no one in South Africa, given the historical context of apartheid, would have full nuclear industry capability, and they are not currently working in the nuclear industry. And the nuclear industry has been extremely notorious for not including community except on engaging with stakeholders only at the process where there has been either protest against nuclear or people interested in partnering with the nuclear industry. So I think our criteria should not be exclusive for nuclear people only. It should apply across the board with people with relevant qualifying criteria, especially people from a disadvantaged background. Priority being women, disability people, and our communities, who people who represented communities and communities' interests, who come from this nuclear community industry spaces who have been affected. For instance, issues of townships related around the nuclear sector, people who come out of the communities in the nuclear sector industry, mainly being the Western Cape as well as the Gauteng area. But that doesn't mean people from Limpopo who have not had an opportunity to be closer to nuclear sites, etc., whatever, can be excluded. So, in our approach, maybe let's go the technical route, but be open to the fact that this is a role for community as well as labor relations, labor-based, candidacy. So the scope cannot be highly technical to an exclusive level. You might even find a qualified person has no any of these criteria that you're requiring, but they have had civil society, they've had experience in terms of engaging, they've had some level of coming in from NGOs and they understand the space, etc., and understand the legislative environment. So that's what I wanted to deposit. But right now, if we're opening up the full list, maybe then we should say, okay, fine, let's go back again from the full list and discuss it all together and then come to an agreement. If not, are we adopting what is currently being recommended on the 17 list? That is my deposit. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Shabeling. I think it was important that we come back here because we want to move together in each and every step of the process so that all of us are on the same page when we reach the conclusion. And I do take the fact that I found the process moving. However, I think the way that it is going now allows for everyone to be able to see, of course, utilizing the lenses of the criteria that had been agreed upon by the committee. So I do believe that now that we have seen what has been shortlisted by our researcher, applying our own criteria, and those who are in red, it means that they have not qualified utilizing our criteria. So I do believe that in the evening meeting, we will then arrive having the list of all those who are in green. I do think that for the community rep, we have a good number. I did hear that the comments about one of the applicants where there was an issue of the application form instead of the nomination form. And I think it is on the community rep, that is one name that we will need to discuss later. Because like we agreed when we started that in this meeting, we are not actually going into detail, but we will take that particular matter with us to the evening meeting to get into it and discuss that part. And then we will be left with the labor reps that are in green to be able to further cut them down. We have had the proposals of the proposals on what should be utilized, and I think we have been taking note of it. Our support staff has been taking note of all of those suggestions, and they will just be read out in that particular sitting, and then we will agree that this is what we are going with, and then we apply it. I do believe that by the end of the evening meeting, we should have been able to cut down. But also, if we need more time, we will make the time available because we want us to have something that we have all agreed on or that has been a product of discussions of this committee. With those words, I think that the meeting has gone well. After we have received the briefing by the Department of Electricity and Energy, later on, we will then get into this with those who are in green now in the list, who have made it to the next round. And on the community rep, we have got the 5 names with one that still needs a final determination. And then on the labor reps, we'll be discussing on those who are in green. Of course, just before or after rather, we have agreed on what criteria, or if there are any additions in our criteria that we'll use to further cut down the numbers. I think with that, our meeting comes to an end. Thank you for your participation. Let's please go over the reports that we have in our disposal in preparation for the evening meetings. And I think if we have been able to prepare in time, even after the presentation, we will be ready with what questions and comments we have or based on those reports that would have been given. Thank you,
Yeah.
honorable members.
Chair, quick clarity question.
Yes, honorable Chaveling.
Remember, I raised the fact that there's already a short list of 17 people, right? Before us. Are we discarding that short list and starting the process of bringing in names? Or are we saying with the current short list and those ones that are in green criteria, we're going to be discussing that in the later meeting?
Thank you, honorable Chaveling. Honorable Hassan.
Thanks, Chair. I would also just wanted to get a clarity. I don't think it's the 17 names. The way I understand Lee's table, of the 17 community representatives, only 5 qualify. And of the 103 labor representatives, only 57 qualify. So we effectively have 5 plus 57, which brings us obviously over 60. But I just thought I'd make that determination. So I just want to be clarified by Lee if that's a correct understanding, because then we would still need to obviously whittle down the labor to a reasonable amount, A, for publishing, and B, ultimately for interviews. But of course, we'll have that discussion later on this evening. I just wanted clarity. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. I thought we're all on the same page because that is the presentation we have received from Ms. Bramwell, where in the community rep, there are 5 in green. And we'll remember that Honorable Milliham had asked about, or rather made a suggestion that on the 4th one, who didn't have a nomination form, but had a nomination letter instead. So that is why I do specify that there is one particular application in the community rep that we'll have to look into later. And then on the labor rep, it is that number which has come out. That is why all of us are actually discussing that. How do we cut down that 57 to be the number that we want to take forward? So that is what it's about. But then I'm going to allow Ms. Bramwell to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Shabaling, the 17 is not the short list. The 17 was all the applications we received for the community rep. And the 103 was all the applications we received for the labor rep. So what we've done now is that we've applied the criterion to cut it down to the short list. So what we've done is what you see that we've given. Let me just share again. So these are the 17 applications we received, Mr. Shabaling, and only 5 of them adhere to the criterion. So that is the shortlisting. There's this is the issue that Mr. Malam has brought up, that she didn't submit a nomination form, but she had a letter, and I said that she qualifies. So that is up for discussion of the 5. But the others, the greens is the ones that's qualified. Same with the labor rep. Of the 103 that we received, applications we received, we cut it down. We applied the criterion, and then after applying the criterion, we got 57. So what we're discussing now is how to further cut down the 57. So we're only looking at the green. So this is what the chair was saying we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to look at the 5 community reps if we're happy with them. And we're going to discuss the one that Mr. Malam said we should take out. And with regards to the labor rep, we're going to look at the 57 and add, and we're going to do additional criteria to cut the 57 down. So that is it. The 17 is not the shortlist. The 17 was all the applications. So the shortlisting now has been done. So we're discussing the shortlisting, if that's clear.
Thank you, Ms. Rambo. Honorable Shabling, I don't know if that's a legacy hand or it's a current hand. Okay, thank you. Let's bring our meeting to an adjournment and we will reconvene later on. Thank you, honorable members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Ngiyabonga.